In the summer of 2016, one film looked and sounded great. However, when it finally came to watching it, it honestly was one of the most disappointing cinematic experiences I have seen in a while. This film was, of course, Assassin's Creed. Nah, just kidding, it was Suicide Squad. It was so bad that at the time it made it to number 1 on my worst of 2016 video. And admittedly, that's a video that has aged quite a bit. So, half a decade later, what differences would the Suicide Squad have? Well, other than the pointless addition of a the. The answer is, this one is actually good. Hey guys, welcome back to another video, and today I am going to be reviewing The Suicide Squad. God, they really need to fire whoever's in charge of making their titles over at DC. Explaining that these are two different movies is very confusing, so just get better at titles, DC. But anyway, The Suicide Squad, that was obviously released last weekend, was written and directed by James Gunn, and it stars a huge cast of actors, including Sylvester Stallone as a talking shark. But of course, the main name involved is James Gunn, and by the looks of things, he was given pretty much complete creative freedom, because this just screams the kind of films that James Gunn both made with Marvel and made before then. And honestly, it's exactly what the first film should have been. A lot of the problems I had with the first Suicide Squad is it felt like they pulled pretty much every single punch they threw. With this one, they really didn't. It was exactly what it needed to be. It was witty, it was action-packed, it was comic booky, it had a simple plot, and it was violent as all hell. I am shocked this film wasn't 18 rated, and in all honesty, I think it actually benefits the movie. This is a very violent movie, and it's a stylistic choice. If you can call a shark man eating a human alive a choice. But yeah, general thoughts, I really like this movie, and I'm going to be going through some minor plot details, but I'm not going to be giving away any big spoilers in this video. There are several things that I think you can take away based on certain things that I just saw with this. Like I said, the amount of creative freedom that James Gunn was given, it's clear that this guy is a massive fan of the comics. He pulls out so many obscure characters and references to use utterly at his disposal. And the weird thing is, James Gunn, through basically a very fast pace and very creative editing, and above all else, a great script, is able to sort of brush past how stupid everything is and make you honestly take it seriously. There's a lot of levity behind a lot of the action sequences in this movie, and whilst there are stupid elements, it's funny. It's a DC film that is genuinely enjoyable to watch, and it's the first one in a while that I have really wanted to rewatch. And this is mostly down to how goddamn energetic this script is. And you can just see through the way it's directed and through the way it's written just how passionate James Gunn was. This really felt like this was a child of his. This really felt like it was his film, and I've got to give him more credit for this. A lot of the film's successes are all on his shoulders, so big congratulations to James Gunn. So I'll start off with talking about the script. The plot, admittedly, is very simple, and honestly, I think that's something that this film could have actually done with. The first Suicide Squad was notably not very clear in its plotting, mostly due to a load of studio reshoots and a couple of failed plot twists. In this film, they only really had one plot twist occur, but it made a lot of sense. Although, what I will say is, in order for them to get to that plot twist, they did have to conveniently leave out and pop out some information on us towards the very end, which didn't feel quite so earned. It felt like it was sprung on us out of nowhere and really could have done with some foreshadowing. But other than that, it was still a good reveal. On another note, I absolutely love how this film flips between different characters' storylines using some really creative editing choices. to transition between these scenes, and in all of these there's such energy and vibrancy. The visual style of this film is so much better than the first Suicide Squad's. It's filled with colour, it's filled with life, it's filled with practical effects, and yeah, they really help out this film. I think the dialogue in this film is fantastic. Each character is... Admittedly, none of these characters are the deepest characters out there, but one thing they do in this film that they pay attention to is they make us at least understand and or care about every single member of the Suicide Squad. Every character we follow, we get a very clear idea of who or what they are, and I've got to appreciate it for that. The highlights for me included Bloodsport and Peacemaker, played by Idris Elba and John Cena respectively. Their friendly rivalry was so much fun to watch. I also really liked Polka Dot Man, which I wasn't expecting. And I also really appreciate how they gave Harley Quinn something to do and something that made sense for her to do, which is something I've really been crying out for, because she's genuinely funny in this movie, and for once she's never annoying. Which I got to give the film massive props for. But as a general rule, the comedy in this film is utterly fantastic. There are so many brilliant jokes out there, in my opinion. There's a lot of, shall we say, dark humour in this film, which is where the violence plays right into it. But this film is just really comedic at some points, and I feel like it really helps with the energy and making clear that this film, it's not trying to be some deep, depressing film. It's just trying to be a goofy comic book movie, and I feel like that understanding of what it is and it committing to that fully adds to the film so much. Going back to the story, I feel like the pacing is so fast-paced, and it's because I think James Gunn knows where to put that information, how to speed it up, how to slow it down. He knows where to put in the jokes, he knows where to put in the serious moments. And yeah, it's a really well-balanced script, it's a well-paced script, and honestly, I never got bored. Okay, well that's a lie. There were some scenes where I were bored, and they were all related to the political figures on the island who, let's face it, just weren't as exciting of characters and honestly weren't that investing of villains. And honestly, I feel like this film could have done completely without those characters and it wouldn't have made a huge difference. They definitely could have reduced their role and I wouldn't have really cared. Because ultimately this film isn't about its villains, and for the most part you can cut the villains out of this story and I honestly think you'd pretty much get the same amount out of it, which is one major criticism I would give this film. Going back to the film's benefits though, the action sequences in this film are amazing. For starters, they really know how to separate all their action set pieces through using really creative uses of powers and weaponry and types of fight scene based on location, and always they're able to put some sort of comedic lens on the action sequence, which is great. I think the camera work in these scenes is great. I love all the practical effects they're using in these scenes, and also the CGI is quite good. Both Weasel and King Shark are characters that I never expected to make it as big as this in the DCEU, but nonetheless they're here and yeah, they look great and they are two of the funnier characters in this film. I also want to say that I appreciate the use of sound in this film. This film has both a pretty good original score of its own, but really its remaining soundtrack of real music is used very well. As a whole, sound is used quite well in this film. Let's talk about more serious things, because I've talked about how this film is an absolute blast, which it is, and it spends a lot of its time being a blast, but I also want to talk about when this film tries to be serious, because yet again, the film for the most part pulls it off. We understand the choices that every single character makes, and subsequently, we're invested in them. we're invested in all of these moments, and due to some very clever scene inclusions and editing choices, I was really invested in this story. Although admittedly, with it being a comic book movie, there are overwhelming cases of plot armor that go on here. However, ultimately they still establish stakes. It's just quite annoying when those stakes occasionally break themselves, but for the most part I'll give them a pass. But ultimately this film was an utter blast. Yes, it's violent and stupid, but I love it that way. It's got a fantastic script, it has a cast and crew who are so committed and are having so much fun with it. All of the actors fit their roles really well and give it 100%, and ultimately this film just flows very well. Yes, it does have some dull points that you most likely will realize were more dull upon rewatch, but nonetheless, I want to see this film again because I had so much fun with it the first time round. It's exciting, it's funny, it's deep, and for the most part, it has real stakes. Except for one scene towards the end with Amanda Waller, but that's a spoilery thing. Regardless of that, for those who really like the look of the Suicide Squad and are just looking for an absolute blast, I'd really recommend this film. Admittedly, it's not for everyone due to its violence and goofy nature, but I really like this movie, and I'm going to be giving it an 8 out of 10. Hey guys, did you know that one of the stars from this movie is following me on Twitter? I know, so if John Cena can do it, why can't the rest of you? Check out my Twitter at MrChickenMovies, and if you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe, like and comment. Let me know down in the comments below what films you want me to talk about next, and let me know what your opinions on the Suicide Squad are. But as always, thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.